looking at breach data is so important. There's a number of good industry reports out there. Verizon Data Breach Report, the IBM Xforce Report, that's done with the Panama Institute, Sophos. There's several good reports out there that I think are very executive friendly. So if we have CIOs and CISOs on the phone who are struggling to get the message up to management and those senior executives for better sponsorship of your programs, these are great reports that are very executive friendly. So we're going to leverage some of those in our conversations today. But one of the big topics of conversation this past year was ransomware. It is growing like mad. Per some of the industry's reports, this one from Cyber on Q3, we had a record number of successful reported attacks. I will say reported quite often because there's a number of breaches that do not get reported publicly and to these type of reporting organizations. Some of the clients I've worked with in the past, they have been breached and never reported. They handled it with their insurance company. They decided to cover the cost, whatever that looked like. So it doesn't always get reported, and I'm sure most of you know that here. But of the reported ones, we had a record number of ransomware attacks this year. We will see record dollars. And I say this year, we're looking at 23 numbers. But it's been very interesting to see the number of attacks and how it grew, because initially it looked like we were off to a slower year. But 1,471 successful attacks in one quarter. There's a lot of money being spent when you look at the average cost of one of those breaches. If you look at what country's leading, the USA, that's 2,100 reported attacks in 2023. Based on all the breach data we hear, that kind of sounds like a low number. But if you look at that, that's 6 reported attacks per day. So if you're getting into the millions per attack, this is a very lucrative operation for attackers. And if you want to take a look at how we rank, the next closest country is 286 successful attacks. So it's very interesting to see how we rank against other countries when it comes to these cyber attacks. So, and I'm going to tell Saeed or anybody else on the call, if you have a question from our team here, please jump in and ask. That way we bring a little more data to you. But as we look at the cost of these attacks, the average cost per ransomware attack per the IBM report is $5.13 million. I'm going to tell you, if you look at the FBI report, you're going to see a significantly lower number. A lot of those reports from the government, on the government side of the fence, they're only looking at the cost of the ransom, not lost business, cost of recovery, forensics, all of these things that truly roll up into that cost of that breach. And that's what IBM looks at. It looks at all of those things. And I think that's very important, because we all care about our bottom line and what we're having to spend to get our operations back up and running. So 5.13 million is a significant number. And that is a global number. US will tick a little bit higher than that. And that is up about 13% from 2022. I always bring up the topic of ransomware. If it were a country and we ranked it by GDP, it would be in the top 100 countries of the world. We're in the mid 20 billion mark just on cost of the ransoms. Cost of recovery runs that number up much, much higher. So it is a very successful method for attackers to take money from you, which is ultimately their goal most of the time. So the real impact here, and one of the things that we have a difficulty conveying to management sometimes, is the impact of it is the ability to operate. What happens to your organization once that ransom is engaged? You're looking at lost productivity, lost business, potentially lost customers. I know we have a lot of different industries that check in on these calls. Your government side of the fence, your city and state governments, a lot of times they're just bringing a lot of discomfort and inconvenience to the citizens. We've had a breach recently that I don't know that was publicized, but it was a county that was breached with a ransomware. They could not none of their citizens could close on a home because they couldn't do title searches. So things were down that while may have not had a financial impact to the city, it certainly impacted the citizens. So there's a lot of things that roll up into these that it's costing someone something. As we look at a little bit of recovery, one of the misconceptions that we hear a lot, we'll
Excuse me,
pay the
John.
ransom. Yes, yes. Sorry.
Sorry, I had myself on mute, so I was trying I was trying to ask you a question before you went on to your next slide.
Okay.
So I had a couple of questions, and following up on what you said about the title search thing, while that may not have a direct economic impact on, the city or the county, for that city or county economy and those businesses in the area, that does have an impact. Because if you're a realtor or something like that, you don't get paid until everything closes. You don't get paid until, the final, you know, dot is dotted on that document. So, I mean, that's kind of where we look at I guess when you're talking about the 5.13 million, there's a lot of things that go into that. One question I had was, are they showing, or is IBM saying this money is coming out of pocket of the customer, or does this include insurance costs? Does this take into account for a public entity that they may be getting assistance from the county or from the state to help to offset costs? Does that take into account all of that?
It usually takes in all of the above, and that report has a really good breakdown of how the costs are broken down: recovery, response, and notification. If you have 100,000 people in your system that have just been affected by a breach, now you're paying some type of security monitoring services or credit monitoring services. That's a large chunk of recovery costs too that doesn't get factored in. And the painful part, based on your question, some of these fringe costs are not being covered by your insurance. So
Mm,
the insurance may come in and pay the ransom, but depending on how your policy is written, they may not be helping you with the credit monitoring services or the forensics cost and these things. So it is a little bit of everything that rolls into that cost, and they do try to factor in lost business. So if you're the Target breach from back in 2014, I mean, they lost hundreds of millions because that happened during the holiday gift buying season and customers stayed away. So there's those impacts all roll up into this 5.13 million.
yeah. Okay.
Um,
Another question I had was, um, obviously ransomware is continuing to grow, and the cost continues to grow. Is there any indicator that there is not necessarily a stopping point, but that there will ever be a plateau? Is there anything we're seeing in regard to, um, you know, maybe FBI data showing the ability to track, catch, and potentially prosecute individuals who, are the bad actors? Is there anything indicating that we're ever going to see a plateau? Not necessarily just stopping, but at the very least, it's not going to keep growing exponentially.
yeah, unfortunately, when 2023 kicked off, there were reports almost bragging that, hey, ransom is dropping, our ransomware
Mhm.
attacks are dropping this year. So we started out a little slow, and then we ended up breaking a record. But based on what we're seeing and everything we're seeing from clients, working with our clients, as well as all of the industry reports that we try to gather and read, um, I I don't see this slowing down. It's one of the easiest methods for an attacker to get paid.
Mhm.
I can steal your data and try to sell it on the dark web, but I have to find a buyer who sees value in that data.
Mhm.
Nobody values their data more than the business owner or the stakeholder, right? We value our data way more than we value someone else's, so it's easier to sell it back to the owner of the data than it is to someone else. So when you look at those things, and now you even have, and we didn't even really get into in the slide deck here, is you have the encryptionless ransomware attacks that are going on. They're even easier because
Mhm.
they're coming in and stealing data and holding that data for ransom and say, pay the ransom or we're releasing it publicly. So not even on the dark web publicly. They're going to put it out on a public website that anybody can get to. So that is
Mhm.
working, and that's ticked up in 2023. So it's very interesting. And as of right now, I don't see any way to slow this down other than trying to find the best controls possible. And we'll talk a little bit later about data backups. I mean, the goal is to not pay the ransom. But long answer to your question, I do not see this slowing down. So